Before we get into the video, I have to basically just say this. Hey, my fucking microphone has been having issues lately. Like, genuinely, I need to get a new one. So, yeah, bear with me. Have fun, and remember, life sucks. So, yeah, hopefully I get this mic fixed soon. Bad Nick Mechanic made a bad video about Sonic Adventure 2. It literally doesn't make any sense. That's why I'm covering it today. You know, this is a very, very good divorce from my regular content that I usually do. I usually do shit about drama videos, but this video kind of pissed me off enough for me to go like, what the fuck? Okay, so, why did it piss me off? Because they make like common errors that most people who are fans of these games don't make, and that made me mad.
Sonic Adventure 2 is a very difficult game to try and critique. I find a lot of problems and praises with the game impact multiple areas. It's difficult to discuss one single aspect of this game without inevitably talking about what at first seems like to be an unrelated area just to make a single point. So if it feels like I'm jumping around a bit, I am trying to keep this as concise as possible, but I'm now on the fourth draft of this script and leave me alone with doing it this way. An old adage in media is show don't tell, but in video games it goes a step further to play don't show. You want the player to feel like this is their story as much as it is the characters.
Obviously, this is stupid. You don't need to see every event within a story for the story to make sense. If you think a part of the story is wildly interesting and they didn't show it, unless they explain details that make it cooler than it actually appears at first glance, it's probably not that interesting, and that's why they didn't show it.
Especially in a platforming game like Sonic. On the screen, that might appear to be Zool, Crash, or Sackboy doing all the cool stuff, but it's the player making those characters do all the cool stuff. The game is as much the player's adventure as much as it's Sonic's adventure too. Mother, I'm the pun master! But developers will often substitute gameplay for a cool cutscene sequence, which can be okay, but if you do this too often, or make all your sequences cooler than your core gameplay loop, players are going to notice that. They're eventually going to clock on that the character is having way more fun than they are. But there's actually a step below this, which games very rarely do because of how terrible it usually ends up being. And that's the idea of a character telling you about something cool that happened off screen, which you don't even get to see, let alone play. And for some reason, Sonic Adventure 2 decided to do this in a spectacularly bad way, twice. I want to ask you something very simple. At the start of the game, why is Sonic under arrest? The majority of you will already know the answer. Well, Shadow committed several crimes and the authorities mistook him for Sonic. Yeah, I know, but when do you find out about this? And more importantly, how do you find out about this? Oh, well, oh, it's actually not even in that. Oh, hang on. Tails tells you about it in the second most boring cutscene in the game. He sits in his plane just talking out loud to the player, himself, about how Sonic has been accused of destroying military hardware and robbing a bank? Wow, that sounds amazingly cool! Why couldn't I play that?
So basically, what you're saying is, why didn't we just randomly cut to the Dart campaign in order to see Shadow escaping from the bank heist? Didn't make any sense. What's going on?
Look, I'm not trying to sound like the authority of fun, but I don't have to be. Warren Spector is. In his 2017 presentation, Post-Mortem Deus Ex, Spector talks about the lessons learnt from the development of Deus Ex, and there's one part that Sonic Adventure 2 didn't quite get the memo for.
If something is cool, don't even think about letting an NPC do it.
I don't think Shadow is an NPC. I don't think Shadow is an NPC. I'm pretty sure you play as Shadow in the Dart campaign, which you're, like, conveniently leaving out. Now, I'm not saying you're malicious, but you do seem to be a Sexual Assault 1 fan. So me as a Sexual Assault 2 fan, you know, obviously we're better.
Players do the cool stuff. NPCs watch the player do the cool stuff.
Tell me, what do you think sounds more fun? Actually playing a stage as Shadow the Hedgehog, breaking into a busy bank, destroying robot guards, finding your way to the vault, grabbing a Chaos Emerald, all whilst being pursued by armed security, only to yell Chaos Control as you escape into the night? Or watching Tails tell you about the fun bank heist you weren't even allowed to see?
Okay, obviously this doesn't make any sense. Clearly, he's not on the Dart campaign, which means, obviously, a lot of stuff isn't supposed to make sense. You're supposed to get both stories to get the entire picture of what's going on here.
This boss fight now because someone's ego got bruised. It goes back to what I said at the start of this video. Why am I not playing the more fun, or in this case, the more interesting game? Hey, do you want to know a really easy way to help the player fully understand what Sonic has been through thanks to the actions of Shadow, while simultaneously building up the tension in their rivalry?
Have them literally fight halfway through the level. Boom, that's how you do it. You have a quick cutscene where fucking Shadow or Sonic pushes the other one into the platform. That shit would be based as fuck, I'm not gonna lie.
Let them play through it. I really like City Escape. I think it's a fun level, and I've seen so many people say they also like this stage. The stage opens with such a great mystery for the player. Why are the police trying to arrest Sonic? I'm sure most people would be asking that question if they were actually fully aware that's what was going on when they first played the game.
Alright, here's your connective tissue. Sonic broke out of a helicopter. A guy who he broke out from is clearly distressed. If he's clearly distressed, obviously he's going to try to get the guy back. So, when those robots come down, you're going to assume that they're controlled by the pilot guy who was in the fucking thing from the first cutscene. You're not aware that they're gun or the police, but you are aware that he just broke out of something he shouldn't be leaving. And he's trying to be, gotten back. So although they don't explain literally everything, the tension is already raised by the fact that he is obviously wanting fucking Sonic to be back in the helicopter.
One of the biggest criticisms you can levy against City Escape is that it doesn't continue the narrative setup from the first cutscene very well. In Dan Taylor's 2013 GDC talk on his 10 principles of good game design, he notes how there's 3 types of narrative at work in a level which aid in good design.
There's explicit, implicit, and emergent. Explicit narrative is anything that's explicitly called out to the player. Implicit is anything that the player figures out for themselves. And emergent is the story that the player makes up in his or her own head.
Let's focus on implicit and emergent. City Escape doesn't really do implicit storytelling that well, so as a result, the emergent narrative is also lost. The stage never truly gives the impression that Sonic is being pursued by the police or that the government is trying to capture him.
Obviously, it does not make sense for the police to immediately be there right after he broke out of a helicopter and falling. How fast? I don't know. But obviously, it doesn't make sense for the police to immediately show up, right? So it's not going to look like police are constantly patrolling the streets, right? This is like after he's been captured. So nobody's going to be on the streets. And then once they do start appearing, it doesn't feel like they ramp it up until the truck comes out.
Him. If you don't believe me and strongly disagree with that, City Escape is a 22 years old stage. In all that time you've played it, have you ever seen a police car?
I don't understand. Are you saying that there's no police in the world? Wait. Not gonna do it. Not gonna do that reaction thing. Holy fuck, I'm writing a script.
There's so little in this stage to hint that Sonic is being pursued by the government. There's one line of dialogue at the start and a police siren.
Attention all units. Suspect seen heading south. Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
That's it.
Obviously, that would be it. It doesn't make sense for them to immediately be there. Okay, think about it. You break out of the helicopter, you're falling towards the ground, you get there, and now, hey, the police officer who just called back to his place is now over the radio saying, hey, the hedgehog is moving south, which means they aren't there and they don't have the ability to get there. Now, having a police car chase Sonic would make this ride home a little bit more, but like, he's moving faster than most of the cars on the street. I don't expect for anybody getting there to immediately see him or immediately just like try to ram into him as soon as they see his car. That's not what I expect at all.
I'm willing to bet that if you did watch that opening cutscene back in 2001 for the first time and realize that that generic helicopter with the fictional logo on the side was indeed a branch of the government, most of you probably forgot that Sonic was being chased by the police by the time you reached the first cable car, especially since you've now got other things on your mind to worry about, like these giant armed robots, which real-world police don't use. Okay, so whilst I was writing the script for this, on the 30th of November 2022, the state of California passed a law which means that the police in San Francisco, where this game is set, can use armed robots which would be authorized to kill human beings if they wanted to. Well, despite the terrifying thought that Officer Ed 209 is back on the beat, let me continue the point. City Escape is a really fun stage, but at no point do you feel like the police or the government is out to get you.
Yeah, obviously I'm going to restate this at least one more time after this, but obviously if they call down the cops after you break down the helicopter, it's going to take them a little while to find you. Now, what should have happened was probably that helicopter trying to actually follow you as you go down the street. That would probably make everything seem a lot better, but I get your point.
Truck chase at the end, but a generic-looking black truck driving through a city hardly screams your public enemy number one, since most of you probably see this during your daily commute.
Oh no, I'm wanted by the state!
Do not misinterpret my words here. In no way would I say that this is a boring sequence, but this black truck doesn't exactly scream
government.
You don't have to know who the enemy is to know that that truck's trying to run you down after the motherfucker in the helicopter said, "Hey, get back here!" Like, bro, no, you don't need to see everything happen in order for it to make sense.
You don't know that this is the government until long after you finish this stage. You don't get the feeling of having to prove your innocence or wanting revenge against someone who put you in this position. It feels more like you're just trying to outrun a truck, not trying to outrun the government or an antagonistic pursuer. Why does this matter? Because if the game had started with the bank heist, and if City Escape had more of a police presence actively trying to stop you, players are more likely to share Sonic's anger over what they've been put through.
So what you're saying is that they should have locked off the hero story until you completed the dark story. Now, that's like on you, but I think that would be less fun. Being thrown into the middle of a story like it's episode 4 of Star Wars is obviously way cooler than all this other shit.
The irony here is that the game does do exactly what I've described it should do, but with another character. When you play the Dark campaign and eventually get to Radical Highway, this stage is set immediately after the bank heist. Shadow is trying to evade the authorities, and look what happens here. The military pretty much sends all it has to take you out, and as the player, you know something? It does have this weird effect on you. These puny humans and their machines, they can't stop me! You begin to sympathize with Shadow over the human citizens in this game. You start to share his belief that humans are the enemy. They're the ones trying to kill you in this stage after all. And I'll bring this up later, but this cutscene and this entire sequence will have a massive impact over Shadow's character development for the next 3 games in the series. But for now, let's talk more about this game. When Sonic and the player finally meet Shadow, and there's this realization from both the player and Sonic that he's the reason we just went through all that, both Sonic and the player is going to want payback because we share a similar sense of emotional harm caused by him. It's him that the police wanted, not us. End City Escape not with the Bigfoot boss fight, but with Shadow. Keep it exactly as the Prison Island setup. You've barely changed the main beats of the game, but now you've firmly established the rivalry, and Shadow knows what Sonic is capable of now. He's got much more of a reason to be hostile towards him when they meet up on Prison Island later in the story. You can even end the fight the same way the game does, with Shadow using chaos control to escape. You've now fully shown to the player and Sonic through a boss fight that this villain is near identical to you in abilities, but he has something extra that you can't do. It also helps make the mistaken identity angle just a little bit more believable too. Since you now established that Shadow can use chaos control, in the Prison Island fight, have him use it! You've raised the stakes a bit more and made him more of a threat, but narratively, Sonic has more pressure on him to be able to beat this guy and eventually learn the move himself. But even with my proposed changes, you still have the issue of Sonic and Shadow just barely interacting with each other throughout the entire story, and this ends up making their rivalry appear just a little bit weak. And I do think this is a little bit odd, because Sonic Team do know how to make a really good rivalry, as evidenced in their previous games. In Sonic 3, Knuckles is constantly harassing you. He ruins your progression, actively makes the stages harder, and laughs at you whilst doing it.
Oh, you bitch!
You don't even get to fight him directly until the next game, and even though it's amazingly basic, no one fucking cares. It's so satisfying finally being able to take him on due to everything that he just put you through. The only thing you'd really lose from this is the initial mystery as to why Sonic has been captured, but I'd argue it's a better change. Aside from improving the rivalry between the characters and letting the player experience a taste of what Sonic just went through, it places greater focus around the mystery as to who Shadow is, and you've just let your player experience a character very much like Sonic, but a darker counterpart.
So I think the issue is that he doesn't like how the story is formatted. He wants everybody to play the exact same cutscenes, like, twice over, but with dialogue changes. Like, come on, bro. Come on.
Any player is going to be asking questions about the identity, motivation, and skill set of this character. But another improvement from this is that it improves a theme that the game otherwise fumbles a bit, that being the role and actions of the wider government, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Aside from the rivalry, the story has some strange issues that pop up every now and again. One example comes in this scene where the villains discover that the heroes are onto them, so Shadow tries to intercept them. We play through Rail Canyon, the stage ends, and the villains realize that the heroes are onto them.
So what you're saying is that you only want to play as the characters when they win. Obviously, if he loses, he's going to call up Dr. Eggman and be like, "Hey, yo, these people are onto us. They know exactly what we're doing, the plan. They know it all, dog. They know it all." And then Eggman's going to be like, "Yeah, dude. I'm gonna fucking get him this time, nigga. Hell yeah." And then Shadow's gonna be like, "No, done with this joke."
Nothing really changes or progresses plot-wise. And then there's these minor oddities, like how Tails feels really out of place in a lot of scenes, and how his mech will just randomly vanish. I've heard a lot of speculation that part of the reason for this is that the game was heavily edited shortly before release. Tails wasn't originally going to be part of the story, and there's quite a lot of evidence to support this, such as the game code itself making very little reference to him. But giving credit where it's due, considering how the game is trying to tell two large narratives that intersect, it's pretty good for the most part, though there is one instance where the storyline does contradict the other, and it has to do this in order to give each campaign a sense of a successful climax. Each of the two scenarios end the same, with Sonic and Shadow having their race to the Eclipse Cannon, and both being depicted as finally beating the other. The devs didn't have much of a choice. They need to give the player a sense of victory for beating either scenario. But narratively speaking, Sonic must be the one who wins this race in order for the plot to make sense, which is ironic.
So he's actively wrong here. Both scenarios make complete sense. Either Sonic destroys the cannon and it goes terminal velocity because it can't fire, or Gerald Robotnik has been completely turned evil by the fact that Gunn broke into his fucking house, basically. And now he's like, fuck it, I want everything to be fucking destroyed, and sends the cannon on terminal velocity because he's insane. Either way, this works. Like, let's play the cutscene.
What's going on? Why doesn't the cannon fire? What's happening here? It's my grandfather, Gerald Robotnik.
Right? You see, he doesn't do any diagnostic checks in order to see or figure out the problem, which is a moral failing on Gerald Robotnik's part. So either story can be canon, just it'll lean on one side or the other, honestly.
Because I think the Dark storyline ends the stronger of the two. Eggman believes he's triumphant, and then suddenly, Gerald's failsafe kicks in and locks him out. In the last story scenario, we see him desperately trying to figure out what's gone wrong. But in the hero's side, it cuts to Tails, who gets a call from Sonic telling him to look out the window. And I always forget about this cutscene. The Eclipse Cannon explodes, and Sonic is seen grinning. We don't even see how he got to the cannon, or even what he did to make it blow up. He's just hanging there, and then he awkwardly re-enters the control room in the last scenario. Hey, wait a minute! How come we didn't get to do that? We don't even see him reach the Eclipse Cannon, let alone play a cool sequence where he blows it up. That would have been awesome!
I might be wrong, but I always thought that they animated Amy and Tails out of this cutscene because they wanted it to fit more within both stories. No matter what happens, no matter who's defeated, somebody's moving out. Somebody's out of that fucking control room. Now you could say, hey, they just did it because of their own budget, but I thought it was intentional for them to animate them out of the scene.
What's that? That vibration?
Hey, wait! Someone is coming!
You haven't given up yet?
Oh, it's all over for us.
What do you mean?
I just received a message from my boss. This space colony ark is currently approaching the Earth at an incredible velocity. It probably will impact Earth.
What's that on the screen?
We are skipping really fucking far ahead in the video. I just got back home from fucking work, so yeah, let's skip.
Gerald Robotnik is the real antagonist of this game. Technically, we're actually playing as him, or at the very least his ideology through the avatar of Shadow. Shadow might be the character promising to get revenge for Maria, but at this stage in the game, Shadow is still suffering from mind control thanks to Gerald.
I was able to complete my project, Shadow. I designed its mind to be perfect, pure. I will leave everything to him.
All of Shadow's actions are just a continuation of Gerald's vow after the raid on the Ark. It's not until this moment in the final scenario that Shadow gains free will and goes against Gerald's wishes, but the vast majority of the game, Shadow is just Gerald's instrument to continue his work and bring humanity to its destruction. And what's really strange about this is how many people actually support this and believe that Gerald is in the right. At the time I was writing this, I spotted multiple people saying how they felt sorry for Gerald Robotnik, and some said he was right to do what he did, and then there's this one. Lost his granddaughter he was trying to cure and reasonably went insane. I don't blame him for going on a genocide from beyond the grave.
America deserved 9/11, dude. Fuck it, I'm saying it.
Holy shit. As bonkers as it is to side with Gerald, I can understand why some people do. It ties into one of the lesser talked about themes of the Sonic series, that of the role of the government in the wider state. For a period of time, Sonic games began to introduce the idea of a human government and a wider militaristic force to support their power and influence, and they took the stereotypical approach of the government and wider state not being very bright or effective. They're sending both the police and the military after you to try and take you down.
Look at the destruction going on there. Don't you see? Don't you see? That place is literally fucked. Tails could go insane in like a day just like Gerald did, but Tails has the means to literally destroy all of them. That shit's wild. That shit's fucking wild.
There's even a scene in which the president is being briefed that the social and economic infrastructure of the country is collapsing all around them, but instead of mobilizing his military forces against the reason for that, he's sat in his limo negotiating with the reason for that. My guy, this is Dr. Eggman you're trying to peace talk with.
Eggman in this game is literally a one-man army. He broke into a military base, broke Shadow out of prison, all in like half an hour, apparently. Like, dude, I'd be negotiating too if I was under the assumption that this nigga could literally kill me in 5 seconds. And he probably could with the Eclipse Cannon, but he didn't have all the pieces yet. But I didn't know if Sonic informed the fucking government that he had all the pieces.
Oh, and it gets so much worse. Players eventually learn that the government sent a commando team to raid Gerald Robotnik's lab, which went so horribly wrong that the commandos shot and killed multiple people, including Gerald's own granddaughter. It's really easy to side with Gerald Robotnik and think that his plan is okay, since we've had our own dealings fighting with the same government forces that also attacked him. Even in our own daily lives, it's hard to side with a fictional government when our own political leaders are found to be lying to us, or being arrested as part of an investigation into missing finances, or facing trial for keeping classified documents next to a toilet. These all happened in the same week. So it's kind of understandable why so many people see the government in Sonic Adventure 2 as the enemy.
True, so is that why we see Shadow the Hedgehog as the enemy? Because he's blood.
Here's the funny thing though, based on the information the game provides, the government are in the right. Oh boy, I can't wait to read the comments section on that one, but before you do, let's just recap the game's backstory and see if you can spot the obvious problem with it. Gerald Robotnik is working on a cure for his terminally ill granddaughter, Maria. The only hope she has is through Gerald's work to create Shadow the Hedgehog, aka the ultimate life form. So-called because he's been genetically engineered and his blood might be the key to a cure. But before Gerald can finish his research, his laboratory is raided by a government commando team. During the raid, Maria is shot and killed, Gerald is taken to Earth where he's imprisoned, forced to work as a slave, and then later executed on orders from the government. The entire incident is classified and remains a secret for over 50 years. And for those of you that have actually played this video game, who'd like to point out the obvious problem with everything I've just said? Well, for one thing, most of what I've just said isn't actually communicated to you anywhere in the video game. In fact, in some instances, the precise opposite is. Maria has a terminal illness and Gerald is working on a cure. Anybody like to point out where the game tells you this, or even hints that this is a possible plotline? I'll tell you. It doesn't. Whilst it's possible a line or two got lost in localization, it's not mentioned or even hinted to anywhere in the story. But more crucially, it's not even alluded to in the stage design itself.
Obviously, it doesn't matter that Maria was terminally ill. She ended up getting shot. Think about that. If she ends up getting shot, you explaining that she was terminally ill doesn't make it either better or worse that she got shot. She still got shot. She didn't die of natural causes. It really doesn't matter.
When you explore any of the stages set on the Space Colony Ark, you don't ever see anything that looks like medical equipment, or anything resembling a sickbay. For a scientist who's in charge of an entire team of people, presumably helping him work on a cure, why doesn't the game make any allusion to the very nature of this work? I know someone is likely rushing to the comments right now to say, these games aren't that deep, they don't contain that level of subtle contextual clues.
The defense for this is a pretty obvious one for me. Now, this may not make any sense to you, but it's been 50 years. Most of this equipment is either degraded in boxes or was destroyed on the raid in the Ark. That's what you could assume. And also, he's going to make a point when they show the past version of the Ark.
In Shadow's game, the stages set on the Space Colony Ark do contain evidence of medical research. Maria even comments on them being an important breakthrough for mankind. Sega's efforts to retcon Gerald into a good guy scientist happened as recently as last year. In the background of this official piece of artwork, you can see that they're learning about medical treatments.
Don't quote me on this. I'm only have ever played these games like 2 or 3 years ago. But from what I remember, all the medical equipment only ever appears when Maria and Shadow are on screen together. That's the only time it ever appears. I don't think any version of the Ark after that actually shows any of the medical equipment. It seems like he only had like 2 or 3 rooms with medical equipment, and we just ended up not seeing those, which is wild.
Gerald's relationship with weapons development has all but been dropped from series canon in the 20 years since the game first released. But SA2 and even Shadow's game does make it clear that Gerald was developing weaponry, and I think it's a shame that this angle of him has been dropped completely, purely because it gives us more to discuss about his motives, and it makes it a far more interesting discussion than, oh, the government was wrong, they did a bad thing.
Even with him developing weaponry, you saying this doesn't actually make it a more nuanced discussion. If you have literal proof that he's trying to cure his daughter, and that's like most of what he was doing, and they make it clear in like supplementary media that he was like quite literally only preparing if people broke into the Ark, well then, yeah, all you could say is, oh my god, he's like trying to defend himself in case of an attack, which is like totally fine by me.
I think we can all agree is clearly present within the plot, since it's one of the main driving forces for it, and this theme wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Gerald Robotnik in the first place, and that's the idea of revenge. The best revenge plots are the ones where we can empathise completely with the character who is seeking revenge for some form of injury or injustice that they've received. Captain Ahab from Moby Dick is one of the greatest examples.
Pulling him closer! He'll not escape from...
Is it just me, or did anybody else think that Moby Dick was just a mobile penis? Alright, I'm being for real. Okay, growing up, I thought Moby Dick was a mobile penis going through the ocean. You know how fucking baller that is? Making like a fucking movie called Moby Dick?
Scale of revenge, we have lost his leg, and my uncle yelled at me.
Saucy boy.
I suspect Gerald Robotnik wanting revenge for his murdered granddaughter is probably around here.
What? That is not where you put that. Okay? First of all, it's a selfless reason, which gives it, you know, +6 on that scale. Obviously, you know? And then, man, he gets murdered like 6 years later. I feel like if I was murdered by somebody who also killed my granddaughter, and I had the ability from beyond the grave to get back at this nigga. Alright, so these are all the points that I can refute. I'm really thinking about doing more of these. If you guys want to see more, like, anti-media analysis, because fuck these long-ass fucking YouTube videos, dude. That shit gets mad fucking annoying when they make something long and they just say, like, stuff that either doesn't make any sense, or stuff that does make sense, but they say it in such a weird way that makes me think they're a pompous asshole. So, you know, it comes off every which way, you know. And remember, I'm not the moral arbiter.